Prince Harry reportedly told his cancer-stricken father that without taxpayer-funded armed security, he would not bring the children to the United Kingdom to visit him. And King Charles's response was silence. Not an argument, not a counteroffer, not a public statement, or a briefing to a sympathetic journalist. Not even a signal through an intermediary that the conversation was welcome. Silence. And in the context of this family, at this particular moment in the king's health journey, that silence is arguably the most significant and revealing response Charles could have given, and the one that tells you the most about how the palace has decided to manage this specific pressure. When are you going to learn, man? That it is completely inappropriate and unacceptable, and the king simply will not have it, and the royal family simply will not have it with you calling up trashy reporters at trashy mainstream media publications to try and force them into doing something they don't want to do. Tonight we are going through what was reportedly said and why the framing of it produced the reaction it produced. Why the security dispute looks fundamentally different depending on whether you read it as a logistics problem or a leverage position. What the Balmoral scenario reveals about the practical options that actually exist, and why the time dimension transforms this from another chapter in the Sussex institutional saga into something that touches on questions most people understand from their own lives. The king is managing a cancer diagnosis that is not in remission. The grandchildren are 7 and 5. The gap between those two facts is the actual story. Let's start with what was reportedly said, because how the communication was framed is exactly what caused the reaction it caused. And the reaction tells you how the statement landed, which is part of the evidence about what it communicated. Is now 100% trapped. I mean, he talked about it on that TV show that he's the one that can't get away because now she rules the roast. She's cut him off from the family. She's got no family. She's got the friend. She's got Marcus Anderson. He's a fun person and he will fill her in with the gossip and all of that sort of stuff. But you know, Harry to her a means to an end. According to reporting that circulated and attracted significant attention, Harry communicated to his father that without appropriate security arrangements in place, he would travel to the United Kingdom alone rather than bringing Archie and Lilibet. The framing was practical. Without the security in place, the children cannot safely make the journey. And Harry would not expose them to what he characterizes as an unacceptable level of risk by traveling without protection. That position taken in isolation is a defensible one. A parent making safety-based decisions about their children's travel is not inherently remarkable. If the security question were genuinely a neutral logistical matter involving two parties who disagreed in good faith about the appropriate level of protection for a specific trip, the statement would be a straightforward communication about where negotiations stood. What moved it out of that category is the years of context that surround it. Harry's dispute with the palace about his security arrangements is not a new disagreement arising from one planned visit. It is an active, contested, litigated, multi-year dispute that has been fought through legal proceedings, public statements, and sustained media coverage. Court cases have been filed and decided. The palace's position that the level of protection provided to Harry changed when he departed from royal duties, and that this is an institutional matter governed by established process rather than personal preference, has been maintained consistently through all of it. In that context, a statement linking the children's presence in the king's life to the resolution of that security dispute places two things alongside each other that the palace has consistently argued must remain separated: family relationships on one side and institutional security policy on the other. Mixing those two categories, making one contingent on the other, is precisely the kind of move that the institutional side of this dispute has resisted throughout, because it transforms a policy question into a family emotional question in ways that create leverage the institution cannot respond to without either capitulating or being seen as cold. The implicit logic of placing family access alongside the security dispute is that resolving the security question is a precondition for the family relationship to function at all. And the person whose decision it is to resolve or not resolve that question is the king himself. Why is Harry making like all these games around his children, trying to be this, man that gets what he wants all the time and using your children to do it? It's so wrong and disgusting. I don't even know. The harshest characterization of that framing, pay up or you will go to your grave without having known your own grandchildren, is not what was literally reported in any transcript. It is the reading that some commentators applied to the underlying logic of what was reported. Whether that reading is fair depends on what you believe the intent actually was, and that is genuinely unclear from the outside. What is clear is that Charles's response was silence rather than engagement, and that silence deserves as much attention as the reported statement that preceded it. Charles has advisors, communications teams, trusted intermediaries, and established back channels specifically for sensitive family matters of exactly this kind. He could have offered a counter-proposal through intermediaries. He could have asked his team to signal flexibility on some aspect of the security question. He could have authorized a trusted third party to open a private conversation. He stayed publicly silent. Royal observers who have covered Charles for decades read that silence as a specific strategic and personal choice. Staying silent under this kind of sustained public pressure is actually the harder option because it allows the narrative to be shaped by others rather than controlled. Accepting that cost signals that engaging with the framing would cost more than absorbing the story. Is just a broken man, Dan. He is broken in a big way. And I feel sorry for those children. I really do, because they're the ones who are going to be the ones losing out. For Charles, engaging publicly with a position that ties family access to security concessions would require either capitulating, which would set a precedent that institutional decisions move under family pressure, something William would strongly oppose, or publicly refusing, which generates its own damaging coverage about a grandfather and his grandchildren. Silence avoids both. It does not resolve anything. It does not choose between the two outcomes. It simply continues. If it's giving you the full picture on the story, the institutional context, the Balmoral scenario, the time dimension, the like button costs nothing and it keeps this channel going. Because Prince Harry is due in the country next month, he still has no confirmation from the Home Office that he's going to get the taxpayer-funded security. Good. He still has no confirmation from King Charles that Harry will meet him. Good. Because remember, what remains so central to all of this is the threat. Now let's talk about the Balmoral scenario, because it has been raised repeatedly by royal commentators, and it reframes part of the logistics debate in a specific and useful way. The argument runs as follows. Harry has demonstrated repeatedly across recent years that international travel is achievable when it is genuinely prioritized. He visited Ukraine during an active conflict zone. The Sussex operation has arranged multiple international trips to locations that would present genuine security challenges without those trips being derailed by the absence of a specific institutional arrangement. Which raises a specific and pointed question. Is the United Kingdom uniquely unsolvable as a security environment for a former senior royal with a private security team? Or is it uniquely contested as a political and legal battleground where the dispute has taken on a momentum of its own that goes well beyond the practical logistics of moving from California to Aberdeen? Your grandchildren should just be a natural thing. There should not be any negotiations around seeing your grandchildren. How absurd is that, you know, and at the end of all of this, Dan, Harry is going to regret it so much because you do not use your children as pawns. Balmoral is royal property, and one of the most extensively secured private estates in the country. The security infrastructure there is permanent, professional, and exists regardless of which guests are present. The travel route from a private airfield involves primarily royal property and controlled terrain rather than public commercial spaces. The estate spans thousands of acres, large enough that a family visit could occur entirely within its boundaries with no movement into environments where Harry's individual arrangements would become relevant. Several royal observers have made the same argument. A visit of a few days, private travel directly to the estate, no public appearances, no press access, is logistically achievable within the security that Balmoral already has in place. The children would be with their grandfather on his own secure property. No commercial security arrangement needs to be resolved in advance for that specific scenario to work. If that is achievable, and the commentators raising it argue specifically that it is, given the infrastructure that exists at Balmoral, regardless of Harry's individual security status, the question is why it has not happened. That question does not have a publicly available answer from either side. What it implies is that the obstacle is not primarily logistical, not about the mechanics of getting from Montecito to Aberdeen with appropriate safety measures in place. Logistics of that kind get resolved when both parties genuinely want them resolved and are willing to make the practical compromises that resolution requires. They tend to remain unresolved when one or both parties has an interest in keeping the broader question unsettled. Subscribe to so you never miss what we cover next, and drop your take in the comments below on the Balmoral question specifically. Do you think a visit there is achievable if both sides genuinely wanted it? The permanent security question is what several commentators argue is the actual center of this dispute as opposed to the specific family visit being described. The reported demand, as some observers read it, is not really about getting the grandchildren to Balmoral this summer. It is about establishing a precedent, a durable, long-term security arrangement that would follow Harry wherever he travels and for as long as he needs it, regardless of which monarch is on the throne. That arrangement would outlast Charles's reign and become part of the institutional landscape that William inherits when he eventually becomes king. For those who read the dispute this way, the family visit becomes a pressure point in a longer negotiation rather than a self-contained question about a summer trip. And Charles, whose position throughout has been that security decisions of this kind involve institutional process rather than personal preference, would be placed in the position of either departing from that process under family pressure or maintaining it and accepting the consequences for his relationship with his grandchildren. Neither of those options is comfortable. Silence is the response that avoids choosing between them, at least for now. Now, let's talk about time because it is the dimension of this story that cuts through the institutional and political noise and lands somewhere more human than any of the security and legal arguments can reach. Charles's cancer is not in remission. The palace has been careful and specific in its public language about this. He is responding to treatment. The schedule has been reduced in intensity. He is in what they call a precautionary phase, but the cancer itself is not resolved. He is 76 years old. He received the diagnosis while managing the first year of his reign, while navigating a period that would be demanding for any new monarch, let alone one who came to it later in life. He has carried it with visible determination and public grace. Continuing to work, continuing to perform the functions of the office, continuing to show up. He is also a grandfather whose relationship with two grandchildren who live 8,000 miles away is by all available reporting extremely limited. Archie is 7, Lilibet is 5. They are precisely at the ages where a grandparent's consistent physical presence shapes memory and shapes a sense of extended family in ways that cannot be meaningfully reconstructed later through photographs and video calls. The relationship that exists during these specific years, the one built in the ordinary spaces of spending time together, playing together, being present in the same room, becomes the foundation of how a child understands their place in a family. If it does not exist during these years, the absence leaves its own foundation of a different kind. Several biographers and senior royal correspondents who have written about Charles have noted that he carries this part of his family situation genuinely and deeply. The sourcing on his approach to the reconciliation question consistently describes a man who is not hardened in the way that William has, who leaves doors open, who reaches out through intermediaries, who absorbs significant public criticism and private hurt without closing the relationship off in response. Charles's model is not William's model. William draws lines and does not redraw them. His approach is to make a judgment and then maintain it. Charles, by disposition and by instinct, keeps returning to the possibility of repair. That quality in a father and grandfather becomes more poignant and more urgent as a practical matter in the context of a serious illness because it means the person most naturally and consistently inclined to extend grace is also the one facing a timeline that nobody in this family fully controls and nobody gets to reset. The permanent security question is what several commentators argue sits at the actual center of this dispute as opposed to the specific family visit that has been the surface focus of the reporting. The reported communication, as some observers read, it is not primarily about arranging a specific visit to Balmoral in a particular summer. It is about establishing a durable precedent. A long-term security arrangement that follows Harry wherever he travels for as long as he needs it, funded by the public and applicable regardless of which monarch is on the throne when the arrangement is in place. An arrangement of that kind would not end with Charles's reign. It would become part of the institutional security apparatus that William inherits, and it would be significantly harder to revoke once established than to decline before establishment. For those who read the dispute through this lens, the family visit is functioning as a pressure point in a longer negotiation about a permanent structural question, one that would establish the Sussex security arrangement on a durable basis rather than resolving a single trip. A summer visit under those conditions is not really about the summer visit. And Charles, whose position throughout has been that these institutional decisions are governed by established process rather than personal or family pressure, is placed in the position he has been in since the dispute began, either departing from the institutional position under pressure or maintaining it and absorbing the cost in terms of his relationship with his grandchildren. Neither option is good. Silence is the third option. It does not resolve the dispute. It does not choose between the two bad outcomes. It simply continues. And the clock that nobody controls continues alongside it. The Harry who described in his memoir watching his father absorb the news of the Queen's death and thinking about how lonely he looked, that Harry understood something specific and apparently genuine about his father's emotional world, about what Charles carries privately that does not appear in the formal public record. The distance between that understanding and the current situation, between the person who could see his father's loneliness and the person now maintaining a position that deepens that loneliness, is part of what makes the security dispute feel to outside observers like something other than a straightforward logistics disagreement. Harry has spoken repeatedly and with evident feeling about the consequences of losing his mother young, about how that loss shaped everything that followed, about the specific wound of a parent being gone before a child is ready, the things that were never said, the questions that can no longer be asked, the conversation that could not happen because the person was no longer there to have it. He has articulated this understanding about grief and time and the permanence of absence with more force and more feeling than almost any public figure of his generation. And he has made it central to how he presents himself and his motivations. Some observers have noted the painful parallel between that stated understanding and the current situation with his father and found it very difficult to square. Harry knows from personal experience that he has described at length what the permanent absence of a parent feels like. Charles is not absent. He is present, available, reportedly extending grace repeatedly. The distance between them is not the distance of death. It is the distance of a legal dispute and a set of conditions that have not been met. That parallel between a son who knows what it means to lose a parent before he was ready and a father who is managing a serious illness while remaining estranged from grandchildren on the other side of the world. What is not a comfortable observation to make, it is nonetheless an honest one. The Thomas Markle dimension surfaces regularly in discussions about this story, and it is worth addressing directly because it adds a layer that complicates the narrative in a specific and difficult way. Meghan's father has been publicly and completely estranged from his daughter and has had no relationship with Archie and Lily. That situation exists in direct parallel with the Charles situation. And for observers trying to form a view about where the pattern of estrangement comes from in the Sussex story, the parallel raises specific questions that do not have comfortable answers. If the estrangement from Thomas Markle is primarily about his specific conduct, the pre-wedding tabloid cooperation, the staged photographs, the sustained public statements, then it is a different kind of dispute from the institutional security disagreement with the palace. Different causes, different contexts, different remedies theoretically available. That is the argument for treating them as separate cases. The argument for treating them as part of the same pattern is simpler. Both grandfathers have essentially no relationship with the Sussex grandchildren. Both situations are the product of choices made by adults rather than the children. And both situations persist year after year despite the fact that the children are the ones who bear the actual consequence of the estrangement as time continues. Two grandfathers, two complete absences, two sets of choices made entirely by adults. The children are 7 and 5 and do not have a meaningful say in any of it. The Invictus and the Beckham dimensions that emerged in the same news cycle provide useful context here. Harry has been absent from the FIFA World Cup VIP arrangements in a tournament being held in the country where he lives. While David Beckham, whose falling out with Harry traces back to an accusation Harry's camp made and a trip to Australia that Beckham made and Harry apparently had no time for, is one of the faces of the event. The sports world made its assessment about whose presence enhances it. The conversation about Harry standing on the international stage was already well underway before the security and grandchildren story added its dimension. This is the broader landscape in which the Balmoral and security questions sit. The institutional relationships that once gave the Sussex operation its leverage. The royal connection, the celebrity friendships, the major commercial partnerships have each contracted or ended over the period of the dispute. The one element in the story that has not contracted is the family itself, and specifically the weight that comes from time and from illness. The children who carry the Sussex royal titles. The father who is managing a cancer that is not in remission. The grandfather who keeps the door open while the clock continues. The window that neither side fully controls because nobody in this situation gets to determine how much time is actually available. Where does this leave things? The security dispute is not resolved. No meeting between Harry and King Charles has been confirmed or publicly scheduled. The children are young and their grandfather is managing a serious illness that is not in remission. The window that the king's health creates for family time is not static and not guaranteed. For observers who have followed this family across several years, the situation has a specific and frustrating quality. It is not moving in any direction that the observable facts support. Back-channel optimism surfaces periodically in coverage sourced to unnamed observers suggesting that progress is being made and that a visit is quietly being arranged. The observable facts continue to produce a different picture. The grandchildren are in Montecito. The king is in London. Balmoral exists and is secure and has been available every summer. The summers pass. Royal watchers who read Charles's silence as the response of a man who loves his son and refuses to publicly humiliate him, who is choosing not to draw the family dispute into the kind of confrontation that would make reconciliation permanently harder. See this as one of the most genuinely sad dimensions of a story that has accumulated many genuinely sad dimensions.